Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Dominick from the Comic Book Report YouTube channel, over here doing another guest review for organicpricedbooks.com. Today we'll be taking a look at the DC Comics Omnibus. Of course, we're talking about Grayson, the Superspy Omnibus. The issues in this volume were written primarily by Tim Seeley and Tom King, and illustrated primarily by Mikkel Janin. The comics in this volume were published by DC Comics beginning in 2014. The volume itself collects Grayson issues 1 through 20, Grayson Future's End issue 1, Secret Origins issue 8, Grayson Annual issues 1 through 3, Robin War issues 1 and 2, and Nightwing Rebirth issue 1. And finally, this is an oversized hardcover volume with glossy print paper stock coming in at 792 pages. Okay, and before we flip through some of the contents of the book itself, I do want to spend a little bit of time going through the exteriors of this book, examining the dust jacket a little bit more closely. I think for a book especially like this, I love the look of the dust jacket, all of that white. It looks really modern, clean, crisp. The front cover of the omnibus has Dick Grayson, Agent 37, in this run. Very, very cool. The side is just a kind of white and gray. Really like it. It's really simple, but I think it just works really well. The typeface as well for Grayson just looks really nice. It's really clean. It feels very, very cool. And the back of the omnibus is more or less a stark white with some different writing details, things like that. So it is a really kind of minimalist look at an omnibus cover, but I just like it. It really stands out in my collection. I don't have a whole lot that kind of showcase the omnibus quite like this. Okay, and now we're going to do one final examination of the dust jacket. This time I'll open up and show the interior flaps of the dust jacket. I'll do a full spread so you can see exactly what you're looking at here. I really like the front flap. It actually extends the picture of Dick Grayson, so it almost feels like a wraparound in the inside flap. The back side is a bit less remarkable, but when you spread it all out, it's still a really clean looking dust jacket. After we look at the dust jacket itself, I will show you the under the dust jacket artwork they have printed on the hardback itself. Now, this is something both Marvel and DC in particular have done in recent years on a lot of their hardcover books, especially their omnibuses, which I love seeing. I know I started collecting omnibuses where Marvel and DC both really just printed black books, sometimes with embedded font, but I love the under the dust jacket artwork. I think it's just such a great way to showcase additional art. That being said, what we have here is largely a white book that has these kind of cool gray spirals or circular design work. You don't really see some of the book art necessarily printed on this book, but I still think it looks very stylish and cool. Okay, and now for all you prospective collectors out there, I did want to take a moment to examine the binding of this omnibus. Now, I will say I believe it looks like a glued binding here. You can clearly see some of the glue. Overall, the binding wasn't too bad for me in this book. It's an under 800-page book. I would say it's a little tighter than I like seeing in some of these books. I would have loved to see a sewn binding, but the glued certainly isn't bad. I didn't really have too many issues with it. It was a little bit tighter, but other than that, pretty solid. Okay, and with that out of the way, we'll jump into the collection proper for this omnibus overview. Now, in general, I will try to keep this overview spoiler-free or minimal spoilers the best I possibly can. That being said, this book takes place at a very distinct point in time, and it has a very specific premise. So there are very minor spoilers kind of for the end of the Kyle Higgins Nightwing era. Here we go. Basically, this book takes place after that New 52 series of Nightwing from Kyle Higgins, and it predates the kind of Nightwing Rebirth era in DC Comics. It's right in that gap in the middle, and basically towards the end of that Nightwing run, I think also in the events of maybe one of the Justice League books or something, Nightwing kind of gets outed. His secret identity as Dick Grayson is revealed, and he's kind of presumed dead. But we know reading this pages of Grayson that he's in fact not dead, but he used this opportunity to kind of infiltrate a kind of secret agent organization known as Spiral. We find that he's there on the behest of Batman, who in this world where Dick Grayson, Nightwing, is presumed dead, he's going to use his skills to try to topple this kind of clandestine organization. But we kind of have it framed that he is an agent for this service, Agent 37, and the people working there don't really suspect that he has ulterior motives, but we know he's kind of there, again, to kind of topple this organization that may or may not be kind of corrupt. If you don't know who Nightwing is, who Dick Grayson is, he is Batman's first sidekick, Robin, the boy wonder. He grew up, got his own mantle as Nightwing, his own crime-fighting alter ego, but this is a stage in his life where he actually has gotten rid of that superhero vigilante persona, and he's taken on a kind of James Bond-esque role in this organization known as Spiral. This is such an interesting pivot for this character, and just in general over at DC Comics. I think this was such a cool move. I think this run generally is well regarded. I know I really like a lot of the creators attached to this. I've seen Mikkel Janin, the artist, do a lot of Batman stuff. Tim Seeley, I've definitely read some of his books. Tom King is a favorite of mine. So this was kind of a powerhouse creative team, at least in my eyes. And I'm a sucker for a good spy narrative. I know specifically James Bond. I love all the Ian Fleming novels, all the movies, things like that. So it was interesting to see this kind of send-off homage using one of my favorite DC characters, again, of course, being Dick Grayson. I think this does feel very James Bondy, but it does get into kind of some interesting science fiction themes or ideas. We kind of brush against a lot of that crime-fighting costume vigilantism, of course, and there's a lot of just interesting humor that you wouldn't really have in a James Bond book, movie, to the same extent you would have here. You have a lot of Dick Grayson's kind of tongue-in-cheek humor and levity, juxtaposed with a lot of his just intensity and action-oriented kind of nature. It's a really fun mix of genres and just kind of ideas, and I think it works way more than it misses. As far as how the book is divided up, for the most part, you get a really strong, cohesive narrative from bookend to bookend, but you also have a lot of these smaller mission-based stories that are usually 1 to maybe 3 issues or so, give or take, and they're really spy missions. And as we go through each of these missions, we do get kind of a building of the mythology and overall kind of narrative arcs for the whole series, as Dick Grayson tries to unravel the core of this organization known as Spiral, and ultimately bring its downfall. Overall, like I said, the setup is absolutely there. I like the structure of this book overall. You feel like you get a lot of just kind of standalone stories, but you do have the advancing of that central kind of spy plot line. I will say there are a couple outlier sort of narratives thrown into this book. I think the biggest, most glaring in many ways is the Robin War issues that they throw in here. Granted, I haven't read that larger event that they had over at DC with all the Robins, but what it feels like here is it kind of feels like it's just sort of stuck in here, and I get why these issues are included. It happens during this time. Dick Grayson is heavily involved, but unfortunately we kind of jump around with the story with the issues we get. And I, for one, was left feeling like I lost some of the interstitial tissue for the Robin War event. I kind of was able to fill in the pieces, but again, you feel like you're missing a couple issues, and it doesn't really have the same payoff as the rest of the book, and in fact, it really feels like it breaks up the narrative flow in this omnibus, to the point where you can kind of excise those issues, and you could read this book end to end and feel like you didn't really miss much at all. In many ways, I almost wish they did that, but at the same time, I'm always going to advocate for more issues included in a given omnibus, so I wasn't sad to have those included, and I do think they were really good issues, but it did break the momentum of the story arcs, and it definitely shifted genres from that kind of cool, fast-paced spy narrative to a much more costumed vigilante, common Nightwing sort of situation. But again, it still worked. I'm still happy with it, but that was maybe the one instance where I saw a storyline interjected in this omnibus that really felt out of place. Beyond that, we just have a really, really great sense of voice, direction, and you really feel like everything's building to an ultimate climax, payoff, conclusion, and I think for my money, this book really lands the plane. This is such a great self-contained omnibus, beginning, middle, and end. It can be a really great one-and-done read. I don't necessarily think you need to read a ton going into this book. I think it does fill you in on a lot of necessary things that you would need to know, but of course, you do have more of a benefit if you've read some of that Kyle Higgins New 52 Nightwing era, or if you're familiar in general with Dick Grayson as a character. I think there's so much more payoff the more you know about him, but I think you can go in relatively blind and still very much enjoy this book. There's so much more I can say about the Grayson Superspy Omnibus, but I again want to keep this relatively spoiler free so that anyone who's hoping to have an opportunity to read this book can really discover it for themselves. I hope I've kind of whet your appetite of what you can expect from a book like this. I've showcased a bit of the artwork from Janin. I hope you enjoy it as much as I have. As you can see at the back of this book, we have a healthy amount of extras, including a great cover art gallery, variant cover art, production images behind the scenes, kind of making of. Really just nice to see in an omnibus. Overall, no complaints about this book. It was such a breeze, such a blast to read, and it's definitely one I would recommend to spy fiction fans, DC comic fans, or certainly fans of Dick Grayson. If you're looking for a more full review of this book that maybe includes some spoilers and just greater detail, you can look on my channel in the coming weeks, The Comic Book Report. I'm going to go ahead and try to release a review for this entire omnibus as soon as I can. And if you're looking to pick up your own copy of Grayson The Superspy Omnibus, of course check out organicpricedbooks.com. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and until next time, have a good one.